Shall we start, because I just think it's a subject that people will be interested in,
Yes.
With this question from Sam. Kanye West has just announced a tour of Russia. Are American and British musicians blocked from performing in any countries by governments?
Yes. Okay, this is interesting. It's not so much a tour. He's doing 2 dates in St. Petersburg at the Gazprom Arena. It's interesting, this angle that you've asked about, because we know about people being denied visas to perform, and we've had various rappers that we've tried to keep out or whatever. But it can work both ways. I spoke to someone who knows all about sanctions about this. And
Who knows about sanctions? That's a good job.
In this day and age,
Yeah.
it's free time, right?
My God, he's busy.
London's full of people who help people with sanctions. There's nothing to say he can't perform, but you might have lots of regulations and sanctions about transactions and payments and dealings with various sanctioned governments. So Russia doesn't amount to a blanket ban, okay? Americans can do business in Russia, but sanctions prohibit various categories of services and dealings. Performing isn't one of the categories that it prohibits. But if any of the arrangements that Kanye West makes involve sanctioned Russian entities of any type, he could get into massive sort of legal complications.
Oh, it doesn't sound like the sort of thing Kanye would do. He's not someone to seek out trouble.
Yeah, I know. He's just trying to have a low-key tour to Russia. So say the promoter agrees to pay him $5 million or whatever it is. Russian origin money itself is not prohibited. But if the promoter's sanctioned or any other aspect of the whole supply chain of these concerts is owned by blocked persons, then you can't transact with them. And your payment can't go through a blocked Russian bank at any stage in the chain.
It feels like there'd be quite easy ways around that.
It feels like there would be, yes, but actually making sort of separate entities, people do try to do that all the time and kind of offshore it in different ways, and it's actually quite difficult.
But the sanctions guys are onto that.
There'll be people to help you with that. The Rest is Entertainment is presented by Octopus Energy. Now, show business is full of people who start out as one thing, but then take on some completely new role that completely eclipses it.
And before we get on to how Octopus Energy has done that, a few examples. There are people who start out, in bands, as singers, as actors. A good example would be Victoria Beckham.
She started off in a band, Richard. She was in a band called the Spice Girls.
Okay. You're going to tell me next that David Beckham used to play football before he became an advertising guy.
They have earned far more from their second careers, these businesses they've built up, than they ever did in their first ones.
So the idea that she's a singer, that gets her through the door, gets her known, the culture knows who she is. She then thinks, I'm going to see if I can do something else. And she has the audience who, if she does it well, goes along with her. But do you know what it reminds me of a lot?
Tell me.
It reminds me of Octopus Energy, because Octopus Energy has also outgrown its own introduction. It's the UK's largest energy supplier, but is now also one of the country's biggest installers of heat pumps, solar panels and batteries. The list even reaches the driveway, with a major electric car leasing business as well.
But actually, it's interesting. Inside Russia, I was looking into it, there's been quite a lot of pressure to call off these concerts because he has obviously made pro-Nazi comments in the past. They're not a great fans of the Nazis for obvious reasons.
Russia, yeah, historically.
And the anti-Semitic comments, all of those things. But there are some places in what you're asking about where is actually banned. And Cuba, because of the Cuba embargo, you cannot perform there. You can record an album there, perhaps. I'm just thinking of something you could do if you've got special permissions, and I don't know what you'd have to say. There are other countries like North Korea where all travel is advised, anything other than essential travel. So I think if you decided to go and perform a concert there and then, became suddenly interned or whatever, it's not like you won't get consular support, but you're not everyone's number one priority.
Yeah, if like suddenly Shed 7 are in a prison in Pyongyang, you're like, guys, you kind of brought that upon yourself.
Yeah. Iran is obviously also very difficult, and Syria is also very difficult. I don't hear of any musicians who want to go to Iran right now.
Yeah.
But, I guess there's always one, and it'll probably be Kanye.
Yeah.
But,
you're not, no one's sort of putting out their tour dates, and people are going, Iran?
Yeah.
How about Iran? Oh, I see you're not going to Iran again.
Yeah, it's actually really cheap to go. It's cheaper to fly there, like people will say to you.
I see you're playing in Wolverhampton, but not Iran.
Yeah. So
thanks, guys.
There are these rules, and there are all these different categories, and it's mainly always about payments. That's how they try and get you.
So you can perform, but it's very difficult to find someone who can pay you enough to perform, whose money wouldn't in some way come under some sort of sanction.
In the chain. If nobody in the chain has got any form of sanction, then you can take the money and run.
Yeah, and it's quite hard to have enough money to book Kanye without at some point having got yourself on that list.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if they go ahead. But there is, as I said, there's a lot of pushback in Russia against it as well. Okay, this is not totally related, but it feels like it follows on. Liz says, hi. Hi, Liz. Watching the many musical acts at the BBC proms, I'm led to wonder how an orchestra ships its musicians and its instruments to faraway destinations. I've had enough musical training to know that many of their instruments are worth thousands or even millions, and some are so large they couldn't be easily loaded onto a commercial flight. How does this work?
In a number of different ways. Often, if if I have had this situation once myself, that where I sat very near someone who was sat next to a cello, if you have an instrument that is incredibly valuable, you can book it a seat. And therefore, you have it under control the whole time. It is right next to you. You can make sure it doesn't have to go in the hold. It doesn't have to go through any kind of baggage system at the airport. So if you've got an instrument that is that valuable, you can have it next to you if you want.
My daughter takes her electric guitar over. We just shove it in the overhead. It's not
In the overhead?
Yeah, it's not.
Wow.
It's not. It's a Fender, but it's not expensive.
Yeah, it's a Fender, but it's not. I know, but it's long. But it's quite long to go in the overhead.
Oh no, it goes in every time.
Does it?
She's been taking her guitar since she was tiny. Everywhere she goes.
Okay, but is it a full size guitar?
Is it now? I think it might be nearly the electric.
That feels like it's too long for an overhead.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It goes in every time. But
by the way, one of my greatest tricks is I can open the overhead without getting out of my seat. Yeah. On trains or planes, I can open it, I can put stuff up there and take stuff down, and I can close it again without ever leaving my seat.
That is so incredibly classy.
Thank you. I
love knowing that. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite something.
We need to fly somewhere. Okay, but carry on. But carry on.
And I'll take your daughter's guitar with me. So, yeah, if you've got a very, very expensive thing like that, you can have it yourself. Modern flight case technology is so insanely good now. You would trust, your oboes, your clarinets, your things like that, a violin, you can put it. So bands, for example, will absolutely put very expensive guitars and basses, into flight cases because the technology is so crazy. So the damage is not something that worries them. Things getting lost worries them. Every single flight case has what's called an RFID, which is a radio frequency ID chip on them. So if they do get lost, you know exactly where they are. If they get stolen, you know exactly where they are. If you're a pianist, for example, and it's very, very, you can't put a piano on a plane, you don't really want to put it on a boat either. So most pianists actually will, whatever place they are in, will just find a piano from the same maker, because they trust the maker enough that they will go to somewhere. They will obviously, get there a few days early and work with it, but they'll get a piano from the same maker. But bands, most of their stuff they can hire wherever they are. So if you've got, you stick your guitars, your drums, well, they can all go in flight cases and they can be carried in a commercial hold. But anything you can't take over, you can hire abroad. There's a huge industry in equipment hire for classical musicians and for bands and things like that. And when you're in a country, you would usually, again, use the air because vans get stolen, and that's the thing that, worries you the most. But so taking it over there, if it's super expensive and it can fit in the seat, you'll put it in a seat. If it's super expensive and can't fit in the seat, you'll have to have a different version of it. If it is small enough to go in a flight case, it will go in a flight case. And other things that I think are interesting in terms of certainly when bands tour, is they will often have two sets of everything, certainly, the backdrop and the lights and all that kind of stuff, because you want to be setting up two venues at once. It is cheaper to have two lots of everything than it is to only play one show every 2 days. But, the basic answer really is anything that can go in a hold, anything that is sort of small enough to go in a hold will go in a hold, because the technology is so crazily good. Nothing ever gets broken. Everything is protected from being stolen. If you've got a £500,000 cello, you can sit next to it. Jamiroquai books a seat for his hat.
Oh my God!
I think that's a publicity thing. I think it's a publicity thing. But the thing is always, because his hat is such a big deal for him, he sits next to his hat. Basically, there are huge industries around transporting instruments around the world, and also huge industries around hiring out instruments to any visiting orchestras or visiting bands or things like that. But you can, if you want to, and you will see it occasionally, sit next to your instrument and put its seatbelt around it and just pat it every now and again when you're on a transatlantic flight. Okay, now, following Sam and Liz, Andy says, you often hear movie fans talking about the final girl. How did this movie trope start, and why do you think it's become such a popular plot device, the final girl?
Right, yes. In the film I recommended on Tuesday's episode, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, Gillian Anderson plays the sort of woman who was the original final girl in an original movie Anyway. Right, the final girl is something from slasher movies. It was coined by Carol Clover, who writes film criticism, and she wrote a book called Men, Women and Chainsaws, Gender in the Modern Horror Film, which I have at home. It's very good.
Of course you do.
But the final girl, it's a trope from slasher movies. It's basically the last person alive who ends up confronting the killer. So if you think of like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, and it's interesting, they don't have to be brunette and in a nightie, but it does help.
Okay.
It's almost always a woman. Obviously, it's final girl, but men are killed way more in horror movies. Like sometimes people call them the expendable gender. There's something quite virginal about this girl.
Yeah.
Because sex in these things, in horror movies, particularly often symbolizes death. And blondes often symbolize kind of licentiousness. If there's like a hot cheerleader, okay, it's tickets for her. She's going, right? You know
if you're a blonde woman or any sort of man, you're going.
You're like, hey, let's drink and do drugs at this party, okay? I'm telling you, you are gonna get slashed, okay? So quite straight-laced to some degree, a bit of a sort of Mary Sue, she's almost quite perfect. But we see the plot through her, and that's what Carol Glover writes about in this book a lot. Actually, people used to think, it's really sexist, it's always the whatever, but it's always, I don't know, a girl in a nightie or whatever. But actually what happens is that through those final girls, the movie is resolved and you see the kind of final scenes sort of playing out through them, and they tend to be obviously victorious. The reason it's sort of so popular is because, like all of these things, they're developed sort of, once it becomes a trope, it becomes something that you can ironize or you can make it knowing. And as I said, that movie is like so knowing about the final girl and about the relationship between sex and death in horror movies and all this sort of stuff. So yes, it's very, very appealing. And also some of the best horror movies just have this thing running through them. And I think it's kind of interesting.
Yes, horror movies now can absolutely, they've got such a kind of a history to play off. It's like in some ways, it's like crime fiction in lots of ways, where he goes, we know all the things we have read before. We know that all the readers have read them before. And so you can have fun with them because you know the expectation as soon as someone turns up on screen. And for a screenwriter or for a novelist, that's an incredibly fun thing to play with.
Yeah,
to play
it started
with the audience's
with things
expectations.
Like Scream and whatever, where it became so sort of ironic and meta. And now, as I say so often, horror is just this unbelievable, amazing genre where incredible young filmmakers and different people are talking about every subject under the sun. And it's not really about horror, it's about other things. It's about whatever. And the one I was talking about is like about female sexual satisfaction. It's so interesting. And all the interesting things, not all of them, but most of the interesting things I think are happening in horror. So all of these tropes kind of help, but we all understand them. It's become a very readable language.
It's that weird thing that more rules and tropes there are, actually, the more creative freedom you have because you've got all of these toys to play with.
You're so right. It's just like sort of crime fiction, I guess.
Yeah. Before we go to a break, we have a bonus episode for all of our members. We're doing the history of James Bond at the moment, and this week's one is about the finding of Sean Connery, which is a great, great story. If you want to sign up to be a member, it's resticentertainment.com. You can sign up there, ad-free listening and all that sort of stuff. And talking of ads, let's have some now.
This episode is brought to you by Lloyds Rewards. Now, a big mistake that people make is leaving the cinema as soon as the credits roll because there might be a bonus scene right at the end.
They're absolutely one of my favourite things in the world. Yeah, you never know.
There used to be in Marvel ones, there used to be a mid-credit scene and then there'd be an end-credit scene.
I remember the first one I really remember, two. I remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he tells you to go home at the end, but also Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds, where they would do bloopers. It just feels like a secret little glimpse into a different world.
And it doesn't quite have to be over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a lovely little added bonus. You've done everything. You've made your show, right? You've given everyone everything. It's just a lovely little extra.
Which is also the idea behind Lloyds Rewards. Extra value appearing inside something you were already doing anyway, your daily banking. From shopping to streaming, you can bank on Lloyds to help your money go further.
It's rewards like this that make 14 million people bank on Lloyds. Search Lloyds Rewards in your app. Eligibility criteria, terms and conditions apply, retailer offers and cashback amounts may vary. UK residents 18+.
Welcome back, everybody. We begin with a question about book publication. Emma Wright says, I've recently been looking at upcoming book releases on Waterstone's website, other retailers are available, and noticed most books are released on a Tuesday. Is there a reason for this?
Well, most books, funnily enough, there will be certain things that come out on Tuesday, which we'll talk about, so I can work out probably which books Emma is looking at. Most books come out on a Thursday in the UK. In the US, they come out on a Tuesday.
Yes.
In the UK, they come out on a Thursday, and it's for an incredibly prosaic reason. It's not sort of, oh, this is where to get the optimum charts in or something like that. It's because the supermarkets change their book stock every second Thursday. So it has just become this thing where, the bigger books which are sold in the supermarkets come out on Thursday, so now everything comes out on a Thursday. And for example, you have this thing called Super Thursday every year, which is when all these sort of books come out. And this year it's September the 10th when I'm out up against Jamie Oliver and Julia Donaldson. I think, oh, okay.
Mine is on September the 24th, which is close.
Which is 2 weeks later because
2 weeks later.
They change their stocks every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so it's every second Thursday is when all the big books come out. You get some that come out in between, and it's easier to get in the charts if you come out on one of those in-between weeks. But the big releases tend to be every second Thursday. Now, what Emma has seen is in America, everything comes out on a Tuesday for very, very similar reasons. And when you get books like, for example, Rebecca Yarros or Sarah J. Maas, these big kind of romantasy things that launch worldwide, same happened with Dan Brown last year. If they come out on a Tuesday in the US, then sometimes they will also demand they come out on a Tuesday in the UK. Because it's they cross borders. So if something comes out on a Tuesday, it's usually because it's by a big American author, and they want to synchronize the release of a book worldwide, just so people can't read it in America 2 days before they can read it in the UK. So it causes all sorts of issues. You don't want people to be going to the US to buy, having the book sent over from the US. British bookstores want to be able to get those sales as well, so they'll send it on a Tuesday. But no, most books are on a Thursday. I say mine September the 10th. Yours is September the 24th, unless it's a huge US author, in which case they will come out on a Tuesday because they come out on a Tuesday in the US. What I tend to do in America is mine will come out on the following Tuesday. In America. Funnily enough, Australia are getting my book a bit early this year for lots of technical reasons, but they're getting it a few days early. They're getting the earliest of all, so lucky Australia. But yeah, Thursdays, and it's to do with that's when the supermarkets re-up their book lists every second Thursday. Now, this next question is brought to you by Lloyds Bank, Sam at Lloyds Bank, who asked the question, which TV or movie home makes you think, how did they afford that?
Okay, almost pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
The 90s is a particularly rich time for this. Obviously, one of the most iconic is Carrie Bradshaw's Sex and the City apartment. She pays $750 rent, supposedly. Well, in 1997 to 98, the median rent for anyone in her postcode was way over double that.
And she's a journalist, right?
Yeah.
And journalists particularly get upset if journalists live in incredible houses.
She seems to write one faintly indifferent column a week, but whatever. I mean,
whereas you do too.
Quite.
There's a thing in New York, and it's the same with Friends, isn't it? Where they have that apartment. They could, literally no one there can really afford the apartment they're in. But in New York, they have a thing which is rent control, which is there are certain situations where you can get a really nice apartment for much less money than you would ordinarily get it. And they really hammer that one home. We understand from the beginning that in Friends they live in rent controlled apartments, and so you don't really have to question it. Yeah,
it's in I think it's in Monica's grandmother's name or something. So you can sort of make a more of an ironic joke about it as the thing goes on. In Notting Hill, to bring it back to our own shores, the Hugh Grant character, William Thacker, he has a loss-making bookshop. And apparently he bought it with his ex-wife, so I'm not quite sure why she hasn't got it. But she leaves him, and it was actually Richard Curtis's front door, that particular front door.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah.
Because suddenly there were loads of tourists in front of your front door when you want to go to a spa.
Exactly. He's written Blackadder. That's why he's got that house. But
yes.
the Hugh Grant character hasn't.
I always think with Notting Hill, though, my assumption is always because you could go around Notting Hill now, there are shops there, you think, I'm so sorry, how are you affording the rent on this? Because you're shop doesn't really
Some
sell
lovely
anything.
little things.
Yeah, I just assume that there's family money behind all of those people. There are some films. I think there's Match Point where Scarlett Johansson has an amazing flat in London and she's a waitress. And you're just like, no, this is genuinely, there are films like, they usually find a way to kind of go, oh, by the way, this house is much nicer than it should be because of X, Y, Z. But in that, you're like, you're literally just doing, you've got this beautiful floor to ceiling windows and it's so beautifully furnished and you don't earn any money at all. And there is no backstory telling us that you earn a load of money.
People used to say this about the Home Alone family and say, oh, they wouldn't live in that house. But it's like the Home Alone family, the McAllisters are incredibly rich. They're taking the entire family over Christmas holidays to go to Paris. Okay, so it's this. They've got a lot of money,
and also it's also America. I don't, when people live in America, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what people can afford in America.
No, but I just know that if you're taking 15 people to Paris on commercial flights over Christmas, it's going to be very expensive. Yeah,
you've got a little bit of money. But the reason that people do it, the reason that films do it is, firstly, you need a room to look expansive because you've got to film in it. And so, lots of these things are sets. You have to build them quite big because there will be sets. You need to walk from A to B to C and you need cameras to go around you. They also do need to feel a bit aspirational. You don't really, if we really, really showed those first flats that we lived in, people would like walk out of the cinema.
Oh, please, if I'm watching a Nicole Kidman drama and she's got a rubbish kitchen, it's off.
Yeah.
It's off.
Yeah. Now, the reason this question has come from Lloyds is because we understand that in fiction, you can choose the perfect home. In real life, things can be a little bit different and you do need some help.
Yeah. But with the Lloyds 5K deposit mortgage, eligible first-time buyers may be able to buy a home with a deposit of £5,000. The average first-time buyer deposit was last at that level in 1996.
Search Lloyds 5K deposit to find out more.
Subject to status, you could lose your home if you don't keep up your mortgage repayments. Conditions apply. 1996 average first-time buyer deposit based on ONS data.
Marina, a question for you from Sophie. She's talking about the band KATSEYE. She says, KATSEYE seem to be the next big global thing when they debuted in 2024 with BTS's label Hyde behind them. Now, only 2 years down the line, they're 2 members down and their target audience seemingly changes by the day. And they still have no real signature sound. Is the KATSEYE curse we're seeing now the perfect example of what happens when you try to cater to everyone and follow the trend algorithm? I wouldn't want to be KATSEYE right about now.
Oh my God, I end up having to talk about KATSEYE for quite a lot of each day at the moment. Basically, the background to KATSEYE is 3 years ago, they were found, they had 6 members. They did a Netflix show. There were like 100,000 contestants. They sort of whittled down. And they ended up choosing these 6 girls, Sophia, Lara, Manon, Daniela, Megan, and Yunche. And it's not actually a pure K-pop thing because they come from quite diverse countries. It's a sort of joint venture between Hyde, which is the big K-pop labels. That's the one run by that guy, Chairman Bang, who, once again, I'd like to reiterate, I would very happily read a very deep dive on him.
Chairman Bang?
Chairman Bang, yeah. So what they were going to have was the sort of brutal boot camp K-pop bit and then US production and the wider market and all of that. They're racially diverse. They came from lots of different countries, and there was a big fashion element to them. So they got all these sort of prestige, avant-garde hires, people who were involved in different sort of fashion companies. So you're right to say that they were, obviously the Netflix thing really helped. They were very, very successful. They did a Gap advert that was so absolutely massive. It's by far the biggest Gap advert of all time. That? It's a Gap denim advert. Okay. KATSEYE did it. It's by far the biggest Gap advert of all time. It led to sort of double-digit growth in the denim category. They had loads of magazine covers. They've got deals. It's really interesting. You kind of measure lots of this stuff. Like, it's so much of modern celebrity. It's really interesting, like how many brand deals they have. So much of it is like what campaigns they have. And KATSEYE do Pandora, the charm bracelets. They did a Lush campaign that even by Lush's standards was absolutely massive. But what they have got, as you say, is a real problem with instability amongst the membership. They've got Manon is on hiatus. Now, she is what they call the visual of the group, which K-pop have these kind of stock types. And the visual is the kind of fashion leader or whatever. She was the first sort of black artist in one of these bands. And it's really difficult. So she's on hiatus, and she's been on hiatus a long time. All sorts of things have gone wrong in some ways. It's incredibly controlling, the world of, if we think boy bands and girl bands are controlling, it's very, very controlling. There was some sort of social media private accounts went public. There were photos of them with acquaintances. That loss of control that is so marks K-pop things, there has been a sort of loss of control. They also changed their music style. Now Sophia is on hiatus for health and well-being. I think it's really difficult.
That's Sophia from the band, not Sophie, the question writer.
No, I think that it's very, very difficult, and they were such a huge thing. And you can see the way it goes hand in glove with these big brand campaigns and whatever. That's been very successful, but there has never been so much pressure and so many attempts to kind of have these parasocial relationships and find out what they're really up to. And I've talked about it before, and I've called it like open source intelligence. The way people look on Weverse and all these big K-pop things, it's very, very difficult. And it's really bad that two girls are off. And I don't think, and in the old days, they were able to control this and say, oh, you know, they're just having a rest. And now fan suspicion is like at fever pitch all the time.
Don't name your band after a cat if you want them to be controllable.
And in the old days, people would ignore the toll on their idols, I suppose, because it was just shut down and it was controlled much better. It's very, very difficult now for people not to find out about their private accounts, to see pictures of them with other people. And they've all been folded into these shows about finding bands. I don't know. I would say that KATSEYE still have, and it's ridiculous that we measure their success by this, they still have a lot of those brand deals in place. Yeah. They've just had a big Vogue story about them. I agree that changing the sound seems eccentric. There's something about the drama of them, though, and the sort of sense that they are more uncontrollable than other K-pop artists that I think will keep people...
Yes, their uncontrollability becomes their brand. I mean, in some good news for KATSEYE, it's interesting. We talked on Tuesday's episode about Mr. Brightside being the charts for 10 years and how things now stick around. And KATSEYE have had the completely different thing, which is they had the chart career that people used to have, which is they have a huge fandom, so the song charts at a certain place and then never goes any higher. Yeah. And they've had that their entire career. They'd never had a single. They had never had a single that had ever gone higher than its initial chart position until this week.
Yes.
So every single song had gone in high and then disappeared. But Animal is the first song I think that went in at 16, and now it's number 12. They got 2 songs in the top 20. The album is doing well. So it might be they've suddenly found themselves in a position where people who are not just fans of KATSEYE are finding their music. I mean, it's a very small data point, but it's the first time they've really ever had a song that's gone up.
And they're still getting brand deals. Yeah. But I do think that the things that people used to ignore, if like, you know, more than 30% of the group is off.
Yes,
there's something
at any given time.
There's something not quite right. But people love the drama, so I think there's something about that. So I don't think they've gone away yet.
Okay, watch this space. Watch this KATSEYE.
I think that wraps us up for today.
Lovely to talk to you, everyone. As always, lovely to talk to you, Marina. As always, see you next Tuesday, I guess.
See you next Tuesday.